We were on the couch. The same couch where we'd watched 100 shows together. The same place where comfort had long ago replaced passion. The TV was playing some dumb reality show, the kind where strangers argue about nothing. Chloe loved those. I mostly watched her, the small shifts in her face, the little smiles that used to mean everything. It was almost midnight. I stretched, half asleep, and leaned over to kiss her goodnight, just as I had done every night for 2 years. Routine, warm, ordinary. I love you, I said. She didn't say it back. Instead, she muted the TV. Her thumb hovered over the remote, a second longer than it should have, as if she were delaying something inevitable. When she turned to me, her face was serious, too serious for that room, too serious for that hour. My stomach tightened. Somewhere deep down, my body knew this wasn't going to be a conversation about what to have for dinner tomorrow. She looked me straight in the eye. I like you, Mark, I really do, she said softly. But I'm not in love with you. There are moments in life that feel like a computer crash. The sudden blue screen of emotional death. You don't cry. You don't even react. Your mind just freezes, trying to process corrupted data. That was me. The words didn't sound cruel. They were too clinical for cruelty. But they hit with surgical precision, not a stab wound, but a small, perfect incision in the soul. I like you, but I'm not in love with you. It wasn't a breakup. It was a downgrade, a polite emotional restructuring of my existence. She was informing me of new terms and conditions, as though love were an app that needed a software update, and I was supposed to just click. I agree, I'm a systems analyst by trade. I spend my days mapping out inefficiencies, building logic trees, troubleshooting processes that don't make sense. But there's no flowchart for this. No function that explains how affection transforms into apathy. Still, my brain did what it always does. It processed the input. She likes me. She's not in love with me. Information received. Acknowledged. After a moment, I nodded. Okay, I said quietly. Thanks for the clarification. No shouting, no tears, no begging for reconsideration. Just calm acknowledgement. I stood, turned off the lamp, and walked toward the bedroom. I could feel her eyes following me, confused, expectant. She was waiting for the explosion, the confrontation, the desperate plea to fix what she'd just broken. But it never came. In her mind, she had prepared for chaos. What she got was silence. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something unsettling. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt analytical, detached, like I was observing my own pain from a distance. That's the strange thing about emotional shock. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just hums, quietly, like background noise in an empty room. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A notification. The group chat, her group chat, the one she had once shown me on the shared tablet in the living room. I was still logged in. I didn't need to look. I already knew. She was reporting back to the committee. The emotional board of directors. In real time, they'd be validating her courage, her honesty. They'd call it speaking her truth. The digital applause of moral spectators watching her perform self-actualization. I lay there, motionless, listening to the faint sound of her footsteps down the hall. She entered the bedroom quietly, thinking I was asleep. The mattress shifted under her weight. Then, that soft, cold blue glow of her phone screen. Tap, tap, tap. She was typing. Probably something like, "It's done." He took it better than I expected. Replies would pour in. "You did the right thing. So mature of you. He'll thank you one day." Validation through Wi-Fi. Empathy via emoji. She believed she'd invented a new model of relationship. One where she could keep all the comforts of commitment without the emotional rent. Stability without intimacy. Dependence without devotion. She didn't realize she'd just triggered the termination clause. In that quiet darkness, a small part of me died, not the part that loved her, but the part that needed her. I turned onto my side and stared at her back, illuminated faintly by her phone screen. The sight was strangely symbolic, her facing away. The light that used to connect us, now belonging entirely to someone else. somewhere between heartbreak and logic. I made a decision. If she wanted to redefine love as liking, then I would redefine us as roommates. Nothing more. It wouldn't be revenge. Revenge requires emotion. This would be something cleaner, colder, a recalibration. And as I closed my eyes, the idea began to form with the precision of a new system design. The roommate protocol. No arguments. No pleading. No breakdowns. Just boundaries. Absolute. Impenetrable. Logical boundaries. I would become exactly what she said. I was someone she liked, and I would show her, in silence, what it actually feels like to live without being loved. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far off, the city's white noise echoing my internal one. I stared into the dark until my eyelids grew heavy. The thought looping over and over in my mind. You can't lose someone who's already left you in their heart by morning. The plan was clear. She had changed the rules. I would play by them with brutal precision. Morning arrived like nothing had happened. Sunlight leaking through the blinds. The quiet hum of the fridge. The faint smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. But something had shifted. The air between us felt sterile, like a hotel room that had already been cleaned for the next guest. She was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone, pretending to be normal. I could almost hear the performance in her posture, the slightly exaggerated calm, the forced casualness of someone trying to control a narrative. I joined her silently, poured myself coffee, and didn't pour hers. For 2 years, I'd always poured hers first. Just a small ritual, the kind of habit love creates quietly, like muscle memory. That morning, I broke it. She noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes flicked toward my cup, then to the empty one in front of her. She waited, expecting me to fix the glitch. When I didn't, she laughed lightly, that nervous, polite laugh people use to fill silence. Rough morning? She asked. I shrugged. No, just adjusting. Yeah, I said, still not looking at her. To the new system, her smile faltered a little. What system? The roommate system, I replied. Since you said you like me, but don't love me, I figured I should calibrate accordingly. She blinked, trying to read whether I was joking. I wasn't. The pause between us was surgical, long enough to sting, short enough to sound rational. Oh, come on, she said. You're not really taking that literally, are you? I just meant, I heard what you meant, I interrupted softly. You were clear. You like me. You don't love me. That's valuable data. I'm just responding to it. And I smiled, not warmly, but politely, like a customer service representative, acknowledging a complaint. That smile unsettled her more than any argument could have. For the rest of the morning, the silence was an experiment. Every little habit, the breakfast I didn't cook, the messages I didn't send, the music I didn't play, became a quiet revelation. She had mistaken my love for background noise, assuming it would always be there. Now, stripped away, the quiet was deafening. By noon, she started talking more than usual. Little things. Random things, weather, work, a show she wanted to watch later. I responded with precision, one-word answers. Minimal tone, just enough to maintain the facade of normalcy. That was day 1 of the roommate protocol. By day 3, the system was in full effect. I no longer texted her during the day. No good morning, no how's your day going. She noticed immediately. The first day, she pretended not to care. The second day, she tested me, sent a meme, then a question. I responded with a thumbs up emoji. By the third day, she caved. Are we okay? She wrote. I looked at the message, stared at it for a moment, then replied. Of course. We're roommates. Roommates are fine. And just like that, I watched the 3 dots vanish. Evenings became procedural. I cooked for myself, cleaned my dishes, and left hers untouched. She tried to initiate small talk. I gave polite, factual answers. Every act of affection was now a withdrawn investment. Every gesture that once said I love you had been replaced with silence. And the beauty of it, the quiet, methodical cruelty of it, was that I never once raised my voice. I didn't accuse or remind or guilt her. I simply gave her exactly what she asked for. She wanted friendship. She got neutrality. She wanted peace. She got emptiness. A week later, she started to show signs of withdrawal. She lingered near me more often, initiating conversations that went nowhere. She laughed too loudly at her phone, hoping I'd ask what was funny. She started wearing the perfume I once told her I liked. I didn't comment. It wasn't indifference. It was discipline. Because here's the thing. When love becomes one-sided, kindness becomes currency. And I wasn't going to fund someone else's comfort anymore. At night, I sat in my workspace, headphones on, working late. She'd hover near the doorway sometimes, hesitating. "You're working a lot lately," she said once. "Yeah," I replied without looking up. "It's efficient. Less room for emotional overhead." "Emotional overhead," she repeated, half laughing, half nervous. "Yeah, maintenance tasks. The little things that keep relationships running smoothly. Compliments, reassurance, attention." She went quiet. The kind of silence that feels like realization after a few seconds. She said softly, "You're different lately." "I'm consistent," I corrected. "You just changed the expectations." She didn't reply. She just stood there a few seconds longer, then left. The sound of her door closing was soft, but it echoed like a system notification protocol confirmed. That night, as I shut down my laptop, I wrote the first note in my private log. Day 7. The absence of affection has measurable effects. Subject appears unsettled by the removal of background care. Observation. Love, when withdrawn methodically, creates more awareness than love given freely. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and smiled faintly. The experiment had only just begun. By the second week, the house had developed a new rhythm. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't hostile. It was quiet. To quiet the kind of silence that doesn't heal, but rather stretches, like an invisible thread, slowly tightening around your chest. I'd come home from work to find Chloe on the couch. Watching TV she didn't seem to enjoy. The volume was always a little too loud, a desperate attempt to fill the void. She'd glance up when I walked in, a flicker of hope in her eyes, then quickly pretend to be absorbed in the screen. "Hey," she'd say, casual, careful. "Hey," I'd respond, neutral, efficient, 2 syllables. No more, no less. On the surface, it looked like peace. No arguments, no tears, no slammed doors. But beneath that quiet, something was unraveling, not between us, but within her. She had once mistaken affection for stability. She thought love was a given, a background hum, like electricity. But when that current was cut, the darkness revealed everything she had taken for granted. Sociologists have a term for it: emotional economy. In every relationship, there's an exchange: time, care, reassurance, touch. When one partner stops contributing, the system collapses. And Chloe was starting to realize she'd been overdrawing from an account she didn't know existed. By day 14, she stopped pretending not to notice. "You're distant lately," she said one night as I was making dinner. "I'm present," I replied calmly. "Just not available." What does that even mean? It means I'm here, but not for maintenance. She frowned. Maintenance. Yeah, the effort required to sustain what we don't have anymore. Her eyes softened for a moment, guilt creeping in. "You're really hurt, aren't you?" I didn't answer, because hurt implied vulnerability, and I wasn't there anymore. What I felt was closer to clarity. She kept watching me, waiting for something, maybe a crack in my tone, maybe a sign I was still reachable. But I just kept cooking. "David," she said softly, "I didn't mean to make you feel unloved. I was just being honest." "I know," I said, finally looking up. "That's why I'm being honest now, too." And I plated my food. Just mine. The next few days, I noticed small changes in her routine. She lingered longer in the kitchen, started texting less, started watching me more. When I spoke, even if it was mundane, she listened with full attention, as if every word had value again. That's the paradox of neglect. When affection becomes scarce, Even scraps feel like gold. One morning, I found her standing by the window, holding her coffee the same way I used to. She looked out and said quietly, "I miss how easy things used to be." I joined her, looked out at the same view, the maple tree by the fence, the early sunlight cutting through the blinds. Easy things, I said, usually means someone else was doing the hard work. She turned to me, startled by the precision of it. Her lips parted, but no words came. Because she knew it was true, by the third week, Chloe started to break pattern. She cooked dinner once, the same pasta dish I used to make on Sundays. I came home to find candles lit, the table set. It was beautiful. But something was off. "This looks nice," I said evenly. "I thought we could eat together," she said, smiling faintly. Sure. We sat across from each other, the flicker of the candles throwing soft light between us. For a brief moment, it almost felt like the past, until I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her glass. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. "Doing what?" "This." I gestured toward the dinner, the setup, the performance. She swallowed hard. I wanted things to feel normal again. I set my fork down. Normal was an illusion, Chloe. It worked because I carried most of it. You just didn't notice until I stopped. Her eyes welled. "That's not fair." "Fairness doesn't apply here," I said. "This isn't punishment. It's reality." She looked away then, blinking rapidly, holding herself together. When dinner was over, I thanked her. Not sarcastically, not cruelly, just politely. Then, I washed my plate, dried it, and went to my room. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of her breath hitching, that tiny, almost imperceptible moment before a sob. That night, I wrote another note in my log. Day 21. Emotional withdrawal creates vacuum effect. Subject begins to mirror prior affection attempts. Not out of love, but out of dependency. Observation: when comfort disappears, people confuse absence with punishment. Rather than consequence, I closed the notebook and turned off the light, but I couldn't sleep. Because beneath all the logic, all the precision, there was still a quiet ache. Not for her, but for the version of myself that had once believed love was a transaction worth losing for. By the fourth week, the apartment didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like an experiment reaching its final phase, sterile, cold, and waiting for inevitable collapse. The laughter that once bounced off the walls had long evaporated. What replaced it wasn't silence. Exactly, it was tension, humming under every sound. The clink of her mug, the shuffle of her slippers, even the way the refrigerator door closed carried a kind of restrained resentment. We had become two people orbiting the same space but living in separate emotional universes. She'd try to speak, to re-establish connection, but every attempt landed like static. My answers were polite, rational, deliberate. Never cruel. Never warm. It's strange how neutrality can feel like violence. When someone is used to being loved. The breaking point began with her birthday. It was a Tuesday, ordinary, grey. The kind of day where the sky looks undecided. She woke up before me, lingered by the mirror a little longer than usual. She straightened her hair, applied lipstick, small acts of hope disguised as routine. When I rolled over, I found her watching me, a faint, nervous smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. A beat of silence. Then she added softly, "You know what today is, right?" I met her eyes for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. Happy birthday, Chloe. Hope you have a great day." And that was it. I got up, brushed my teeth, made coffee, just one cup, and left for work. Behind me, she stood frozen in the hallway, like she'd just been erased. Birthdays used to be a big deal in our house. Surprises, breakfast in bed, handwritten notes tucked under her plate. Now, there was none of that. Just quiet acknowledgement, efficient, factual. That evening, when I came home, she was sitting on the couch again. The same spot where it had all started a month ago. This time, the TV wasn't on. She was waiting. "So," she began, voice light, forced. "No special plans tonight?" "Plans?" I asked, hanging up my jacket. "Oh, For your birthday. No, I assumed you'd be out with your friends. Her face faltered. They're busy. I nodded sympathetically. That happens. She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. I just thought, maybe we could do something together. Like before, I looked at her, really looked. There was something fragile about her now, like glass that had already cracked but hadn't yet shattered. Sure, I said evenly. We can order a pizza, if you want. Watch something. Her lips parted in disbelief. That's it. What else would there be? I asked, genuinely curious. You said you liked me, Chloe, not that you loved me. Friends get pizza. Lovers get fireworks. She didn't reply. She just sat there, staring at me, her expression unraveling like she was finally realizing how literal I had. By the fourth week, the apartment didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like an experiment reaching its final phase, sterile, cold, and waiting for inevitable collapse. The laughter that once bounced off the walls had long evaporated. What replaced it wasn't silence. Exactly, it was tension, humming under every sound. The clink of her mug, the shuffle of her slippers, even the way the refrigerator door closed carried a kind of restrained resentment. We had become two people orbiting the same space but living in separate emotional universes. She'd try to speak, to re-establish connection, but every attempt landed like static. My answers were polite, rational, deliberate. Never cruel. Never warm. It's strange how neutrality can feel like violence. When someone is used to being loved. The breaking point began with her birthday. It was a Tuesday, ordinary, grey. The kind of day where the sky looks undecided. She woke up before me, lingered by the mirror a little longer than usual. She straightened her hair, applied lipstick, small acts of hope disguised as routine. When I rolled over, I found her watching me, a faint, nervous smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Morning, she said. Morning, I replied. A beat of silence. Then she added softly, You know what today is, right? I met her eyes for a moment, then nodded. Of course. Happy birthday, Chloe. Hope you have a great day. And that was it. I got up, brushed my teeth, made coffee, just one cup, and left for work. Behind me, she stood frozen in the hallway, like she'd just been erased. Birthdays used to be a big deal in our house. Surprises, breakfast in bed, handwritten notes tucked under her plate. Now, there was none of that. Just quiet acknowledgement, efficient, factual. That evening, when I came home, she was sitting on the couch again. The same spot where it had all started a month ago. This time, the TV wasn't on. She was waiting. So, she began, voice light, forced. No special plans tonight. Plans? I asked, hanging up my jacket. Oh, for your birthday. No, I assumed you'd be out with your friends. Her face faltered. They're busy. I nodded sympathetically. That happens. She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. I just thought, maybe we could do something together. Like before, I looked at her, really looked. There was something fragile about her now, like glass that had already cracked but hadn't yet shattered. Sure, I said evenly. We can order a pizza, if you want. Watch something. Her lips parted in disbelief. That's it. What else would there be? I asked, genuinely curious. You said you liked me, Chloe, not that you loved me. Friends get pizza. Lovers get fireworks. She didn't reply. She just sat there, staring at me, her expression unraveling like she was finally realizing how literal I had been all along. Later that night, by the fifth week, Chloe had stopped pretending. The walls between us weren't invisible anymore, they were structural. Built from quiet resentment, late-night tears, and the deafening echo of things unsaid. The apartment, once a living thing full of shared laughter and overlapping routines, had become a museum of what used to be. Every corner still remembered us, even if we did in single quotes, the couch, the kitchen counter, the bed, all haunted by two ghosts who hadn't died, just stopped believing in each other. It's strange how absence can feel like presence when it's that. By the fifth week, Chloe had stopped pretending. The walls between us weren't invisible anymore, they were structural. Built from quiet resentment, late-night tears, and the deafening echo of things unsaid. The apartment, once a living thing full of shared laughter and overlapping routines, had become a museum of what used to be. Every corner still remembered us, even if we did in single quotes, the couch, the kitchen counter, the bed, all haunted by two ghosts who hadn't died, just stopped believing in each other. It's strange how absence can feel like presence when it's that total. She had started to unravel in ways that weren't dramatic, but unmistakable. Her clothes piled up on the chair in the corner, dishes left in the sink, small rebellions against the structure she could no longer control. The same woman who once prided herself on aesthetic order now lived inside a quiet storm, and me. I kept my routine precise. Clean counters, folded laundry, meals measured, logged, labeled. It wasn't pettiness, it was method. I needed order where emotion had failed, because in a world where love had been treated like an optional subscription, discipline was my new religion. The first real crack appeared one Friday night. She came home later than usual, makeup smudged, hair messy, smelling faintly of tequila and desperation. I was at my desk, reviewing a report, the soft hum of the computer fan filling the room. She hovered in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. "Hey," she said, slurring slightly. "You're still up, working," I replied. She nodded, crossing her arms. "Of course you are." There was silence. Then she exhaled sharply. "You don't even look at me anymore." I looked up, meeting her eyes, calm, level. "What would that change?" "Everything," she said. "It would mean there's still something left." I studied her for a moment. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept properly in days. Her mascara had bled slightly, but her eyes, they were clear and terrified. "I told you what was left, Chloe," I said gently. "You didn't like the answer?" Her lip quivered. "I miss you, I know." She took a step closer, her voice trembling. "I miss us." This time, I didn't answer right away. I set down my pen, folded my hands, and let the silence stretch. Then, in a tone as neutral as a weather report, I said, "It sounds like you're struggling to adjust. Have you considered talking to a therapist?" It was the kind of thing I might say to a coworker having a bad week, logical, appropriate, emotionless. Her expression froze. For a second, she looked like she hadn't understood. Then realization hit her like a slap. "You're unbelievable," she whispered. You're cold." I tilted my head slightly. "No, just consistent." Her face crumpled. "I'm trying here, Mark, I'm trying." I sighed. "No, Chloe, you're reacting. There's a difference." And that was it. She broke tears, frustration, confusion, all of it spilled out in one jagged rush. She accused me of being manipulative, of punishing her, of playing some cruel psychological game. I just sat there, listening, not defending, not fighting, not giving her the satisfaction of resistance, because the truth was, she wasn't wrong. This was a psychological game. She had written the rules. I had simply learned how to play better. Eventually, she ran out of words. The room fell silent except for her quiet, uneven breathing. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. "You used to love me." "I did," I said. "Deeply. Then why does it feel like you hate me now?" "I don't hate you, Chloe. Hate requires energy. You took that from me when you asked me to stop loving you." She looked away, wiping her face roughly with the back of her hand. "Maybe I didn't mean it," she said quietly. "Maybe," I replied. "But the thing about words, they're data. Once they're received and processed, you can't delete them. You can only deal with the consequences." Her voice cracked. "You make everything sound so logical." "It's how I survive," I said simply. That night, she didn't go to her own bed. She crawled into mine without asking, curled up on the edge like a stray animal seeking warmth it no longer believed it deserved. I didn't stop her, but I didn't hold her either. She fell asleep quickly. Exhaustion and defeat often look the same in the dark. I stared at the ceiling, my mind running diagnostics I couldn't turn off. Somewhere in the quiet, I realized that this silence, this stillness, wasn't victory. It was just the end of illusion. Because when someone stops loving you, it's not a single moment. It's a series of microscopic choices. The conversation you don't have. The kiss you don't give. The coffee you don't pour. Death by omission. And she was finally feeling the gravity of every omission I'd made since that night on the couch. The next morning, she was gone before. The following week arrived with a quiet kind of inevitability. The lease renewal notice slid under the door one morning like a verdict. A thin envelope, neutral in tone, indifferent to emotion, 12 months, new rate. Signatures required. For most couples, it would have been a simple conversation. For us, it was a mirror. A reminder that everything we were now existed on paper only. I found the envelope first. I placed it on the counter and went back to my coffee. When she came into the kitchen, still half asleep, hair tied in a loose knot, she stopped when she saw it. Her eyes lingered on the envelope. Then on me. So, she said quietly. It's that time again. I nodded. Yeah, end of the month. She poured herself a cup of water, hesitated. Are you planning to renew? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, watching the faint tremor in her hand as she lifted the glass. Then, I said evenly, I was going to look at other places. Her hand froze midair. Oh, yeah, it makes sense, I continued, my tone deliberately calm, reasonable. The space feels heavier now, like it belongs to a version of us that doesn't exist anymore. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the countertop. Right, that makes sense. Then, softer, you've already found somewhere. Not yet, I said. I've been looking. Something in her posture shifted, a small, almost imperceptible collapse. She nodded again, but her throat tightened around the movement. After a moment, she whispered, So, that's it. What do you mean? This, she gestured vaguely, her hand trembling. This quiet, unspoken ending. We don't even fight. You just let everything fade out like it was never supposed to matter. I set down my mug. It did matter, once. Her voice broke. Then why does it feel like you're relieved it's over? I hesitated. Because sometimes, peace feels like relief, even when it's born from loss. She turned away, pressing her palms against the counter. Her breathing was shallow. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, I said softly. It's just final. The day went on, but the conversation lingered like a song that refused to end. That evening, she came to my room again. Not crying this time. Just quiet, composed, almost calm. She stood in the doorway, watching me as I packed a box of books. Do you ever regret it? She asked. I looked up. Regret what? U.S. how it ended. I thought for a moment before answering. Regret implies there was a better version of what happened waiting somewhere else. I don't think there was. She nodded slowly. You've already made peace with it. I had to, I said. She smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. You always were faster at moving on. You process things. I feel them. That's probably why we worked, I said quietly. Until we didn't. There was silence again. Long, heavy, but not hostile. Just the quiet of two people who had finally run out of illusions. Then she said, You know what the hardest part is? I didn't answer. It's not that you stopped loving me. It's that I can't remember how to stop loving you. For a moment, everything in me wanted to respond, to say something kind, something human. But I didn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that care and reconciliation aren't the same thing. I stepped forward, gently took the lease notice from the counter, and handed it to her. You can stay if you want, I said. I'll move out. It's easier that way. Her voice trembled. You'd really just go? I already did, I said. A month ago, and in that moment, she finally believed me. 2 weeks later, the apartment was divided into boxes. My side, neat, labeled, contained. Hers half-done clothes spilling out, memories left undecided. The night before I left, she knocked on my door. Do you want to have dinner together? Just one last time. She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Sure, we ate quietly. No alcohol, no music. Just two people sharing space one final time. Halfway through the meal, she looked up and said, "You know, you never yelled." "Not once." "I didn't need to," I said. "You heard the silence." She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "I hope you find peace," she said softly. "I already did," I replied. "I just hope you find yours too." She smiled faintly. "Peace sounds lonely." "Sometimes it is," I said. "But it's honest." And that was our last conversation. The next morning, I left quietly. I didn't look back. The door clicked shut with the soft finality of something ending the way it was always meant to. For weeks afterward, I'd occasionally think of her, not with bitterness, not with longing, just with acknowledgement. Like remembering a song that used to mean something before silence became its truest version. When the door closed behind me that last morning, the silence didn't follow me, it stayed behind. In that apartment that used to be ours, it's strange how silence can take shape, how it can fill walls and corners like smoke that never dissipates. I remember standing in the hallway, key in hand, feeling the weight of 2 years compressed into a single piece of metal. It was the key to what once symbolized love, then compromised, then finally, a kind of quiet resignation. I placed it on the counter next to the lease papers, my final signature in a long and silent negotiation neither of us had the courage to stop sooner. For days after I left, Chloe sent nothing. No texts, no calls. Just digital silence, the kind that modern heartbreak specializes in. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means echoes. Through mutual friends, I learned fragments. She stayed in the apartment for a while. The one with the pale curtains she'd chosen, the ones she once said made the morning light feel soft, like forgiveness. But the light didn't forgive her. It revealed everything she'd lost. Neighbors said she stopped opening the blinds. She started leaving lights on at odd hours, as if afraid the dark might finally start speaking to her. The friends who had once congratulated her for being honest, brave, empowered, they'd moved on. Honesty is applauded online, but it rarely stays for the aftermath. The algorithm rewards confession, not consequence. I didn't gloat. I didn't check her social media, didn't drive past the building. I had no interest in witnessing the ruins of a system I'd already decommissioned. But part of me, the human part buried under the layers of analysis and logic, still wondered how long she stared at that empty side of the bed before realizing that she'd been playing with something fragile, something human. It's easy to say you want independence. Harder when independence looks like eating dinner alone under fluorescent light. The sound of your fork against the plate echoing louder than any argument ever did. As for me, I moved into my new place. A small one-bedroom, minimalist, not by design trend, but by necessity. I needed less. Fewer reminders, fewer patterns. I filled the space with silence too, but mine was different. Constructive silence. The kind that lets you rebuild. People often talk about closure like it's a door that shuts. But closure isn't about doors. It's about rewiring. About teaching your brain to stop expecting someone's laughter from the next room. To stop making an extra cup of coffee out of habit. It took time, months, sometimes. In the quiet of the morning, I would catch myself still turning slightly in bed, as if to face her. And then, I'd stop, breathe, and remind myself, some systems aren't meant to be debugged. They're meant to be replaced. Once, I saw her again. Pure coincidence. A coffee shop downtown, one we used to frequent. She was by the window, typing on her laptop, hair tied up, same almond milk latte she always ordered. For a second, she looked peaceful. Then she saw me. The air between us froze, not hostile, not tender, just empty. She smiled faintly. A fragile, tired smile that said more than words ever could. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't regret, exactly. It was recognition. The kind that comes when both people finally see the wreckage for what it was, mutual, inevitable, and strangely necessary. We didn't speak. And maybe that was the most honest conversation we ever had. After that, I stopped thinking of her as Chloe, my girlfriend, or Chloe, my roommate. She became something else. A phase, a chapter, a system that ran its course. But sometimes, When I analyze data at work, watching lines of code align in perfect symmetry, I think about how love is the one system that resists logic. You can model it, measure it, predict its patterns, but you can't control its collapse. Love doesn't fail like software does. It fails like language, quietly, gradually, until words lose meaning. And yet, I don't regret it. Every algorithm, every theory, every rule I'd built around efficiency fell apart the moment she told me she wasn't in love with me. And maybe that's what I needed, to be reminded that not everything in life should make sense. That sometimes, heartbreak isn't a bug in the system. It's an update. She taught me that. Or, maybe, we taught each other. In the end, love isn't lost. It's just archived, stored in the parts of you that still remember how it felt to try. There's a strange moment that comes after the storm. The point where everything is still, and you start to realize the silence isn't the enemy anymore. It's just space. Space to think, to feel, to rebuild. When I look back on it now, that night, the one where she said, "I like you, but I'm not in love with you," doesn't feel like a betrayal anymore. It feels like a diagnosis. A truth neither of us wanted to hear, but both of us had been living inside for months. The thing about love is that it doesn't die in a single moment. It fades in small decisions, in skipped goodnights, in half-hearted conversations, in the pauses between "I love you" and "I love you too." It's erosion, not explosion. And by the time we acknowledge it, we're already standing in the ruins, wondering when the walls fell. Chloe wasn't cruel. She was just human, imperfect, impulsive, scared of comfort that no longer thrilled her. And maybe I wasn't the victim. Maybe I was the one who clung to the simulation of love, long after the system had failed its test. I treated her confession like a software malfunction, when in reality, it was emotional entropy. I've come to understand that love, in its truest form, isn't logical. It's inefficient. It's chaotic. It's a system built on variables you can't predict or control, and maybe that's why it's so precious. Because it doesn't make sense, and yet, we choose it anyway. When I talk to friends now, or when people at work ask how I'm doing, I sometimes find myself describing what happened not as a breakup, but as an audit. A painful, necessary rebalancing of emotional accounts. We had been running a deficit for too long, spending feelings we didn't have, borrowing affection against a future that didn't exist. And in that realization, there's no anger left. Just clarity. Sometimes I think about how many relationships in our generation exist in this gray zone, where two people care deeply, but not deeply enough. Where love becomes a convenience, a shared subscription to comfort and routine. It's not that anyone wants to hurt anyone else. It's that we're terrified of loneliness. And so we stay, rewriting the definition of love, until it no longer resembles the truth. That's what Chloe did. That's what I did too. The roommate protocol, what started as a quiet act of self-preservation, became something more. It became a mirror. It forced me to confront the version of myself that had built his worth around someone else's affection. I learned that silence isn't punishment, it's revelation. When you remove all the noise, you finally hear the sound of your own voice again. In the months that followed, I started documenting my thoughts. Not as revenge posts or emotional rants, but as reflections. I wrote about how love and logic rarely coexist peacefully, how people often mistake detachment for strength, and how sometimes indifference is just grief wearing a mask. Those posts resonated with strangers, online people who had lived their own versions of the same quiet heartbreak. People who had realized that loving someone who likes you is like standing in sunlight that never warms. Your skin. Chloe reached out once. Just a short message. I read what you wrote. I get it now. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but because there was nothing left to say. Some conversations end long before the last word is spoken. What's strange is that I don't miss her the way I thought I would. I don't crave her laughter, or the comfort of her presence. What I miss, sometimes, is the version of myself that existed when love still felt infinite. The one who believed that being good, kind, reliable, that those things alone could sustain someone's affection. But life teaches you otherwise. Love isn't a transaction. It's an ecosystem, delicate, unpredictable, self-balancing. And when one side stops giving, the whole thing collapses. Not in anger, but in silence. Now, I drink my morning coffee alone, not out of habit, but by choice. The same act that once symbolized loss, now feels like ritual. There's peace in the simple things again. The smell of roasted beans. The hum of the city waking up. The stillness before the day begins. If you ask me what I learned from Chloe, I'd say this: that love without reciprocity is just service. That silence can be kinder than pretending. And that sometimes, the most powerful act of love is to stop trying to fix what was never broken. Just no longer alive. The roommate protocol wasn't vengeance. It was a requiem, a slow, graceful way of letting something die without violence, without screaming, without pretending it still had life. And when I think of her now, I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude for the lesson, for the story, for the proof that I can rebuild, because the truth is, every failed system leaves behind data patterns, insights, code you can reuse in better versions of yourself. And maybe, just maybe, the next time love finds me, I won't analyze it. I'll just let it be messy, human, alive. Because love doesn't need to make sense. It only needs to be real. They say heartbreak fades with time, but time doesn't erase it archives. It files the pain into quieter folders of memory, tucked behind new experiences, new laughter, and sometimes a new silence that no longer hurts. Months had passed since I left that apartment. The air in my new place felt lighter, cleaner. I didn't have to hold my breath anymore. Every object had a place, every sound a purpose. The coffee machine hissed at 7 a.m., the same as before, but the second mug never left the cupboard. The absence had become a kind of peace. The first few weeks were strange. Freedom always feels foreign when you've been conditioned to check someone else's mood before your own. I'd find myself glancing at my phone, expecting a message that wouldn't come. At night, my brain still whispered her name. Like an old operating system still running background processes long after deletion. But slowly, the echoes quieted. The system was stabilizing. I remember one morning, vividly it was raining, the kind of rain that soaks through your clothes but smells like renewal. I walked to a small cafe near my office. The same type of place Chloe used to love plants, jazz, overpriced pastries. I ordered my coffee, black. No almond milk, no extra syrup, just coffee, simple, efficient. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even nostalgic. I was neutral, clean code. A man rebooted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to analyze what had happened. I didn't replay the conversation, didn't calculate where the failure began, because maybe there was no failure, just completion. Some systems aren't designed to last forever. They're designed to teach you how to operate the next one better. I began noticing people differently after that. The couple arguing quietly in the corner of the cafe. The woman scrolling through her phone, waiting for a message that probably wouldn't arrive. The man staring out the window, lost somewhere between guilt and relief. Love stories everywhere. One a simulation of connection, each one fragile, temporary, beautiful in its imperfection. I used to think logic could protect me from heartbreak. That if I could just measure love, quantify it, define its terms, I could prevent it from collapsing. But love doesn't collapse from lack of logic, it collapses from lack of presence. From people choosing comfort over confrontation, silence over honesty. From the fear of saying, "I'm not sure I love you anymore." When Chloe said those words, she wasn't breaking me. She was freeing me from illusion, from dependency, from my own need for control. She gave me an unintentional gift, the chance to rebuild from zero. A full system reboot. Now, when I talk about love, I describe it differently. It's not data, it's not a transaction. It's more like electricity, unpredictable, vital, dangerous. You can't own it, you can only flow with it. And if you try to regulate it too much, you lose the spark that makes it real. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder where she is, whether she's happy, Whether she found what she was looking for. I like to believe she did. That somewhere, she's sitting on another couch, watching another show. Maybe leaning toward someone new, and maybe this time, she says it back. Because despite everything, I don't think she was wrong. I think she was just honest before she knew how to handle honesty. We all are, at some point. We all tell truths we don't yet understand. I walk home through the city now, and it feels different. The lights don't blur together the way they used to. Every reflection in a window feels sharper, more present. I see myself not as a man who was left, but as one who learned. Love, like any system, evolves. And so do we. That's the real protocol, the one no one writes about. You lose, you adapt, you rebuild. You let the old code run its course, and then you start again, with cleaner syntax, fewer assumptions, and more heart. When I get home, I unlock my door and step inside. The apartment smells like coffee and rain. I drop my keys on the counter, the same sound as before, but now it doesn't echo. It lands softly, like a period at the end of a long, necessary sentence. I sit on the couch, the light from the city flickering across the floor. There's no muted TV, no conversation, no second voice to fill the space. And yet, it feels full of quiet, full of potential, because sometimes, endings aren't failures. They're the moment you finally start writing something true.